Get to the church blind! Get to the church blind! Go! Now!
I'm Pete Mitchell, and he's Peyton Jones, and you're listening to Hardcore Church Planning, the companion podcast for the Church Planner Podcast and Church Planner Magazine. Each week, we'll bring you interviews from planners who are in the trenches making it happen right now. These active church planners bear it all, share their successes, their failures, and what they'd wish they'd known when they were first starting out. Listen in to discover how God is working in their church plant. Hey, church planner, this is Pete Mitchell.
And this is Peyton Jones.
And you are tuned in to Hardcore Church Planning Podcast. And as always, we've got a great guest. So Peyton, introduce our guest.
I will. Hey, I was just thinking, it was like you were waiting for a tagline, you know, where the church planning is, we need one. We don't have one.
No, so, I've kind of given up at this point. There's no tagline for hardcore.
Yeah, kind of doesn't need one, right? So, hey, here's the deal. So we got this guest. I think we're all sick. We're all sick. We all got a head full of snot today. But we have as our guest today, Jeff Christofferson. He is the director of church planning for North American Mission Board, and he is a Canadian, which is kind of cool because that's part of North America. So it qualifies, right?
Yeah.
So Jeff, he's also the author of Kingdom First with Mac Lake, a fantastic book, which I recommend you pick up. If you're in the multiply training, you read it anyways. So Jeff, welcome onto the show, man.
Yeah, it's great to be here, guys.
That's what you say now. We'll ruin that for you.
I heard the reputation, so I'm
Well, one of the first things we always like to ask when we get started is if you could tell everyone your story of how you came to faith and how you got started working with church planners.
Wow. So and concise.
Of course.
Yeah,
in 30 seconds.
That's right. Yeah, I actually was up in northern Saskatchewan. So if you go to kind of North Dakota and then just cross the border and keep going, you come to the last sort of stop, which is a place called Prince Albert. And then if you go away from there, you get to where I was. And I was at a Bible camp as a young kid, and there was an altar call, and everybody went forward, and I didn't. The guy preached on Christ, on the crucifixion of Christ. I was 10 years old, and I just went to my cabin, and really the Holy Spirit was dealing with me. And my counselor came in and saw me kind of weeping in my cabin, and he had the spiritual sensitivity to lead me to Christ then and there. And then I was got involved in a church plant that was happening. Some of you might have heard of the name Henry Blackaby, and he was pastored a church that started a lot of churches, and I was in one of those churches that was started, and it was a church that saw its mission as the gospel getting to all people, not about gathering people. And so that church multiplied over and over again. People were called into ministry regularly. And he is the leading pastor, and it didn't sort of see it his job to kind of put people in positions in the church, but he tried to figure out how do I multiply these disciples. And so a lot of us end up starting churches at a young age in different towns and places around in Saskatchewan. And so right from a very young age, I knew for sure that my life was going to be about bringing good news. And in the place where I lived, there were just so few churches. It just seemed instinctual that would be about starting churches to bring good news. And so ever since I was 16, I kind of had that as a sort of a life mission. And so planted 3 churches as founding planter, and the last one multiplied numerous times. And so that's kind of my life.
Very cool, man. So we got to get this out of the way. So I grew up as a kid watching Strange Brew with Bob and Doug McKenzie. And in my illusion of Canadians is that you're supposed to say A at the end of everything. That's not happening here. Can you just add that in for our podcast?
I'll have to really work hard on that. was going there, eh? And yeah.
Hey, take off, eh? We're going to talk about church planning. So, and cuckoo, but I'm not going to sing it because I'm terrible.
Wait.
You okay, Hoser?
I'm your father, Luke. Give in to the dark side of the Force, you knob.
He saw Jedi 17 times, eh?
I feel that's only appropriate with Star Wars coming out this week. You know, Little Strange Brew with Star Wars.
Little Strange Brew. Memories.
He's like, what did I get myself into?
Moving along from that mental train wreck. So, Jeff, here's what we want to talk about was there. Okay, so North American Mission Board right now has just hired Brad Briscoe on for bivocational church planter training, and that is way ahead of the curve. Now, Canada is, I know you don't live in Canada anymore, but Canada really is kind of like the halfway mark culturally between America and Europe. So it's kind of, as Kerry Newhoff says, he says it's like the canary in the coal mine. It's just that much ahead of Americans. So it's refreshing to us to see somebody thinking ahead of the curve and talking about bivocationalism. Because when I was a missionary in Europe, there was no other way to do it. I had to be bivocational. I was there for 12 years. I was bivocational 11 of those 12 years. And that was my most effective time. My first year there, I was fully supported until 9/11. My mission support dropped in half, and I had to get a job in a factory. That's where I saw my first 3 conversions within weeks, was being bivocational in a factory. And tell us a little bit about why that's so important to you and NAM in general.
Well, I think, the law of diminishing returns. I've just been watching as in the U.S., we've been using more of an attraction model of church planting, and it's just taking more and more and more money to get less and less and less of a result over and over again, and so when you just look at the sort of stewardship of dollars, you go, okay, a lot of the things that we would call traditional church planting is working in a diminishing way. And so it becomes, we're almost back towards what we can see. The churches that I was planting in Canada, especially the last one, we just really we didn't plant churches for evangelism. We planted churches from evangelism because there was just no people to congregationalize that were, you could shake loose and come join your little thing. And so when you just start thinking about the time that it often takes in order to plant a self-sustaining church, it's probably not the best method to approach it the way we have historically, or maybe more recent history. And bivocational idea, there's just so many good things about it. It gives you credibility in the environment where you're going to be working. It gives you an immediate context to have a mission, have relationships with people who need Christ, and you're sort of on their level. And it becomes a great plan for disciple making, because you can just point and say, follow me as I follow Christ, do what I'm doing, and you're not really a sort of elevated from them in any kind of hierarchy or status. And so I just know that's where our future is going to be. In fact, we're sort of predicting in North American Mission Board that probably it won't be long before more than half of our church plants will be bivocational. And I say won't be long. And so
by necessity.
Yeah. And the more we press into the density and diversity of urban, the more the way we thought about church planting makes little sense. And how do you get into, a place that's like where I was in Toronto, over 40% of the population lived in buildings, tall buildings. And, you're just not planting churches in the same way there as you would. And so, it's just got to be a deal. And when I see, like often when I'm in a city and we just, a church plant catalyst or some kind of a leader discovers a bivocational planter, often, they have a huge heart for the gospel and a huge heart for reaching people, but they don't have any connections or any points of connection. Oftentimes they got a group of people, maybe the wrong group of people, and sometimes their wife's mad at them, because there's no, they don't see any light at the end of the tunnel. And really what we want to do is develop a roadmap, because we have, over the last 30 or 40 years, have blown up every roadmap. And so church planters go from one conference to the next conference to the next conference, zigzagging their idea. And we just want to give a very simple, sound, disciple-making roadmap where here's point one, here's point two, and here's 6 different points on this roadmap. And we'll give you some training on how to get to this next point on the roadmap. And once you get there, we'll open the door for you to get to the next place, and we'll help with the resourcing of that. And so, I'm very, very optimistic about the direction we're heading with Brad. It's exciting.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think, what a lot of guys, they don't realize that the greatest church planner who ever lived was bivocational. Of course, we're talking about Paul.
Yeah.
And there, the couple things that made it so good for him was, one, when you're bivocational, you have no limitations of where you can go. You're like, hey, I'm not dependent on funding to go.
Yeah,
and
exactly.
In 1999, when I went to, I was naive. I mean, I didn't do the red thermometer and project how much I need. I just went, and whatever was coming in was coming in. And I was a moron. I always tell people, don't do what I did, but still am a moron.
I was thinking that, but I didn't want to say it.
But here's the thing. What's great is that apostolic spirit that just says, hey, I just need to reach these people, and I'll sacrifice, and I'll take a stupid job making stuff on an assembly line. No problem. I'll go do it. And I think that's what it's going to take in the future, for bivocational planting. But I think what guys really need to see is kind of like models, like people who have done it, in the sense of, and like you said, where the guys go around to the conferences and they say the same, quotey quote, here's my tweety tweet, check out this profound thing I said. But really, we need guys who, we need to hear from these guys that have been in the trenches, guys like examples of stuff that's worked, because that's what we're not getting. We're not getting a bunch of living examples of bivocational planners who are killing it. What are some of the things right now that you guys are seeing that's just super encouraging from the bivocational front?
Oh my goodness. Well, there's a couple of different things that I love what I'm seeing. I'm seeing, I can think of 2 specific churches that are raising up an army of bivocational planters and planting teams, and they're doing it in 2 very different ways. One of them, it has got more of a classroom methodology that they're doing, and they have the first year of training on theological kinds of things. In the second year, they're more getting them involved in ministry and different kinds of things. And then they're assembling them together as teams of planters, and they're going out and they're really killing it. They're all indigenous. They all, absolutely understand the culture that they're planting in, because they're of it, and they're connected with people. And so they start this new church, and all of a sudden they have all kinds of people coming to it, and seen people come to Christ. There's another one I've seen is a really hardcore disciple making idea in Berkeley that is just I'm just absolutely impressed. I think they had over 400 people this year make applications to actually leave their church and their place and move their jobs and everything to 3 different other cities to plant this year. And it's just like, and so you're just watching how they're mobilizing their church through their jobs and training people over a longer burn for this idea of multiplying churches. And so 2 very different ways of going at it, but both are just killing it. And so those are existing churches raising up armies of bivocational church planners. One takes 24 a year. They do 12 Hispanic and 12 Anglo, and they do 24 of these get leaders a year for this idea, and that's really cool.
I dig it. I think it's a lost art. I think that so many of the things that made the first century catch like wildfire have been lost arts to us. And bivocationalism really makes sense when, like, for example, when I came to NAM, and by the way, for our listeners, that's North American Mission Board, the B is silent. And when I first came to NAM, I didn't know that people funded church planners. I could not believe, because most denominations, if we're frank, most the church planners out in the big wide world, they're the enemy. They're like the guy, the new kid on the block, taking people's, that's how they're perceived. But with North American Mission Board, they're the heroes. You guys are the commandos in God's armor. In God's army. You're expanding the kingdom. So for me, I almost had a little culture shock coming off the mission field, going, there is a denomination that will fund church planners. But I love the fact that despite that we're recognizing that, hey, if we want to go further, faster, we're going to need to really do that. But there's another thing that you're doing, and that is a pipeline, a church planner pipeline. Tell us a little bit about what that is and what's happening.
Yeah, well, Peyton, it's like we've been doing church planning by addition for a long time. And when I say that, I mean we plant a church, and then at some point later we plant another church, and normally how that goes is we look for a church planter. So we began to send our emails and phone calls around and say, I need this kind of a guy, and there's this very limited pond of potential church planters that everybody's been fishing out of for a little while now, especially as we've been sort of putting the pedal down on church planting. And that pond is more or less fished out, and there's not too many people stocking the pond. In fact, we went and looked at I think 16 different church planting residencies that we could find, and in every case, they took an already church planter and then they put their DNA on them for maybe up to a year and then sent them out. And but there's very, very precious few people saying, how do we create an army of church planters? And so we just know that as long as we keep operating, in many ways, this is fruit of the church growth culture, is addition. We're going to guarantee a win. We're going to, as long as we keep operating out of addition, we will continue losing ground, and until we get to the point where we're operating out of multiplication. So this idea is giving churches a discipleship plan that takes a new believer and turns them into a church planter or a church planting team member. And so we have a 3-year church planter pipeline that we're in the midst of piloting right now in 22 different churches of various sizes, from smallish to huge, and just working through that, so that the first year is about the character and the theology. So it's sort of the foundation of the leader. The second year is about disciple making and missiology, and the third year is about church planting ideas. And we're taking our church planter assessment and the values that we think it takes to plant a healthy, sustainable, reproducing church in a post-Christian environment. What are the skills that are needed in order to pull that reality off? Backing the train up and saying, we're going to train people to be able to pass that church planter assessment. And so a person would come in on a pre-assessment idea, and they might say, okay, that pre-assessment says I need to start right from the very beginning in year 1, or it might say I might skip all the way to year 3. But we just really see churches as they're the ones with the people. They're the ones with the Great Commission that's been given to them. So can we give them a tool where they are creating a pipeline within their own church and then sending people out? So that's what that's about in a nutshell.
That's powerful. It's funny because in my last church plant, which was Urban Long Beach, we planted out first and second strings, you lose your best leaders, or so you think, when you plan out your first few churches out of your church plant.
Yeah.
And, by the time the third stringers were gone, I looked around, I'm like, well, after that, man, it's like the people in the bleachers, like, cause I'm kind of like when I plant, I always feel like George Bailey, like I'm trying to get out of Bedford Falls, like, get out, kick this crummy town off my shoes, I don't know if you guys watch that in Canada, but
it's just a wonderful life. Yeah.
It's big here in America. I just saying, but
there was never any royalties on that show. So the networks could play it for free. So it became a thing.
I know. Isn't that funny?
I know.
It public domain. I wonder if we could use it.
Really?
There's something there.
Public domain. So here's the deal is, for me, I was always trying to raise people up so I could get out. And that was what I learned, I think, in my last cycle, was my whole view of training leaders changed, because people would come to me going, hey, train me to plant a church. And I'd be like, hey, I'll train you like Paul trained Timothy. Come with me and plant. That's the best way I can train you. And what would happen is, after those guys would ship, I'd always think, well, surely some of these guys will want to like stay behind. This is a cool church plant. So sure, I mean, it's hard to give a church away sometimes. I never thought that was the case. In the established church, it was like everybody was clamoring for the top, king of the mountain, let me be the boss. In church planting, you train guys right, and they're like, nobody wants to stay. And so anyways,
well, that just speaks a lot of the culture, the kingdom culture you led with.
Yeah. Well, what was really cool, man, is I'm ashamed to say this, because they are gospel animals right now. They're a better leadership team than when I was there. Because I'm still on their group text, and they're just killing it. But the reality is, these were people that nobody would have ever seen leadership potential in. They're now probably the best leaders that church has ever had.
Right.
And it changed the way I thought, because all of a sudden I realized, like, what you're doing with the farm system, it was like Jesus picking these 12 guys that now I don't look for the guy who's aspiring for ministry, or the seminary grad, or the church planner wannabe. Now I just look for average people that want to be discipled. Yeah. And if you disciple people correctly, you can pick from the bleachers, and they'll be your star players before long. And that's all Jesus did, was disciple these guys that had no future in ministry, and they changed the world and turned it upside down.
I mean, Peyton, discipling people correctly is not as complicated as it sounds either, is it? It's basically you as leader listening and living a life that's very, very obviously obedient to Jesus, and then asking people, and being transparent in that, and asking people to live like you. And it's not that complicated.
It really isn't. It really isn't. Well, man, look, it has been really cool to have you on. I know that we're it's a short show, so we're running out of time. But is there anything else you want to add about the church planner pipeline, or ways that guys can kind of get in touch? How do you enter that? If I were saying, hey, that sounds cool, because we got a lot of church planners and non-church planners listening to the show, or people that we got 2 letters last week that were from guys that we were corrupting into church planners, who wrote us saying that we had twisted their minds enough to make them want to do it. How do they get involved in this?
Yeah, well, probably the easiest way would just shoot us an email, probably pipeline@namb.net. And we can start a conversation. And right now we're doing a soft launch. We did our first pilot right now with 23 churches. Come January this year, we're going to start a soft launch with a group of other churches, and then in a larger launch, kind of full out in this coming fall, 2017. But pipeline@namb.net would get a conversation started, and we can see if we can help you on that.
That is very cool, because we will definitely want to get you back on here and talk to you about what the results were, what the findings were, because that's going to be fascinating.
Yeah, well, I mean, I'm personally taking a group of I'm not in a large church. I mean, I'm in a church of 200 and some, and we got 12 men that are all in bivocational leaders that are going through this, and it's really, really fun to walk with them on it.
It's awesome, man. All right. Well, Pete has a question that he likes to ask every person. I don't know if you've listened to our show or not, but
I've listened to the beginnings. I don't know if I ever made it all the way to the end.
Well, now you're in
that
for
works
it.
better.
So here's the question, Jeff.
Yeah.
If you were to get into a physical fist fight with Ed Stetzer, who would win?
Now, we picked him because he is a fellow Canadian, is he not?
He's not, but his wife is. Yeah.
That's close enough. And he works with Daniel M.
What's that?
And he works with Daniel M. Canadian.
Yeah, Daniel M's. He's from Edmonton most recently. That's right. I don't know. I think I would have him on speed, but he might have me on just girth. So
just grab the goatee. Just grab the goatee. You know everyone wants to grab the goatee.
Grab him by the hair of his chinny chin, and it's over.
Did you know we're doing something together? We're Ed and I are starting something called the Send Institute at Wheaton.
Nice.
And it's a way for, I mean, the way he described it, he said NAM used to be kind of the trailing edge of church planting in terms of denominations, and now, in his view, we're leading, and so, but it's a way for us to engage with other denominations and do some joint learning together. So we're looking forward to that. We'll be starting that in this next year. And we'll be hiring one person to be the director of that and second him to Wheaton. And we'll work on that. So, yeah.
That is very cool. Yeah, and Ed's good on the smack talk, man. So I love that you gave him a little. It doesn't mean you can't work together. It's just you got to know when you get in the room who's going to take who. That's all. You just got to know that. So anyways, hey, man, it has been great having you on here. Thank you for all that you do for church planners, for North American Mission Board, and just as you rightly said, just at the end of the call here, for the kingdom of God in general. Thank you that you guys have kept, and I say you guys, but I'm a part of it now. And the reason largely that I'm a part of it is because of that kingdom mindset that NAM has to just work together to expand the borders of the kingdom of God. So thank you for that. And thanks for being on the show.
Thank you, guys. Great talking with you.
Remember, if you are called to church planting, go hardcore or go home.
You've been listening to Hardcore Church Planning. Hardcore Church Planning has been brought to you by the Church Planner Podcast and the Church Planner Magazine, which is available in the App Store for both Apple and Android devices. If you like this episode, leave us a positive review. If you didn't like this episode, we'll be happy to give you your money back.